Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree, and today I'm doing something a little different. Instead of picking a topic that is, from my childhood or something relevant or cool or interesting, I'm talking about something that is kind of sort of current events. We're talking about the state of Hasbro and the toy market and D&D. So, I've seen a lot of YouTubers, especially D&D YouTubers, talk about the um, peril that Hasbro as a company has been in the last year or so. They're not doing well financially. This was punctuated yesterday with a news report saying that they're going to cut 20% of their workforce just before Christmas, which is not good because toy sales are down. Now, Hasbro is a big company, so there's a lot more to them than just toys. They have multiple divisions, but I'm going to talk about four of their divisions specifically. So the first division we're going to talk about is obviously the toys, specifically the action figures. Because I don't know if Tonka is having any troubles right now. I can't say for sure because I haven't really researched that. But from what I've seen, there doesn't appear to be a shortage of Tonka products in stores. From what I've seen, but I can't talk about the action figures. And there's, as an action figure collector, I've had conversations with other action figure collectors and watched YouTube videos by other content creators that have noticed a pattern. And what I notice is when I go to toy stores, Walmart, Target, or whatever, I have noticed that there is a considerable less variety in the Hasbro specifically offerings than what we're used to. I'm going to look at Marvel Legends, I'm going to look at Star Wars, and I'm going to look at Transformers. But I'm going to start with Transformers because that's where I have the most familiarity. I've personally been complaining for a number of years now that Transformers as a brand has pretty much become stagnant. And what I mean by that is up to a point, and I don't really know where that point was, but up to a point, I want to say around 2015 or so, Hasbro Takara Tomy had a habit of refreshing the line every couple of years. And what you got was a whole new toy line. You got new characters, new toy modes, new alt modes, new cartoon or animation, new comic books, etc. And then somewhere along the lines, Hasbro came up with what is known as the forever modes. What this is where Hasbro decided instead of redesigning, for example, Ironhide every generation, every toy refresh, with a new vehicle and a new transformation and a new alt mode, a completely new character essentially. They decided going forward, every Ironhide they made would be the same toy. It would have the same vehicle mode, the same transformation, the same robot mode, the same articulation, the same, sculpting and everything. Now, you would get subtle differences from one line to the next to accommodate the toy line's respective gimmick. So, for example, in Siege, the toy would have battle damage. And Titan's Returns, for example, they would have headmasters. And so on and so forth. Or Power of the Primes, they would be combiners. But at its core, if you stand an Ironhide from any of the past 6 or 7 toy lines next to any other Ironhide from any of those other toy lines, it's with subtle differences, more or less the same toy. The transformation is almost identical. The vehicle mode is almost identical. The robot mode is almost identical, with subtle differences, usually pegs or, like I said, the headmaster thing or the, some kind of gimmicky attachment or component. But it would be the same toy. Now, previously, I'm using Ironhide again as example. each iteration of Ironhide was a completely new toy. Robots in Disguise Ironhide was a pickup truck. Generation 1 Ironhide was a minivan. There have been multiple variations of the pickup truck Ironhide, and there have been variations of the minivan Ironhide. But once they introduced the Forever modes, Ironhide has been a red minivan since. This is the same thing with other characters like Bumblebee and Optimus Prime and so on. Starscream is always a fighter jet. Now, Starscream has always been a fighter jet, but lately he's always been the same fighter jet from one toy line to the next. Whereas Armada Starscream is decidedly different and unique and completely original compared to G1 or Earthrise Starscream. Earthrise Starscream and the, Cyberverse, etc., is just a variation of the G1 Starscream. You have Cyberverse, and you have Earthspark, and you have Transformers Authentics, and all three of them are more or less the same toy, with subtle differences. I do have an Earthrise Starscream. I do have a Cyberverse Seeker Jet. It's not Starscream, but it's one of his brothers. And I do have Earthspark Skywarp, and I have Authentics, or I used to have Authentics Starscream. And it's essentially the same toy. Sometimes it's a little bigger or a little smaller, but the transformation is the same, the robot mode is the same, the alt mode is the same, etc. Same with Bumblebee. You get the race car. You get the Camaro, ever since they turned him into a Camaro. Occasionally you'll get a retro throwback, and you'll get a VW Beetle, but we're not getting Bumblebee as a pickup truck. We're not getting Bumblebee as a tank. We're not getting Bumblebee as a hovercraft. We're just getting either VW Beetle or race car. Those are our two choices. When you get the race car Bumblebee, I have 3 different toy lines. I have race car Bumblebee from 3 different toy lines. And aside from very, very subtle differences in the body, one being the classic Camaro, one being the modern Camaro from the from the Michael Bay movies, and one being a cartoonish representation of the race car, more or less. It's essentially the same car with essentially the same transformation and basically the same accessories. So on the Hasbro side, on the Transformers, you're not getting a lot of variety. You're not getting a lot of original characters. Not to say that we're still not getting original characters. It's just when I go to Walmart or Target or whatever, I see a big wall of Bumblebees, Optimus Primes, Starscreams, Shockwaves, and then maybe 5 other characters. And they're usually repaints or retools of existing characters. Like the last time I went, I saw Bombshell, which has been released countless times. Grimlock. I saw 3 different Grimlocks on the toy shelf. 3 different Grimlocks on the toy shelf. It's just Grimlock. I mean, it's just, which version of Grimlock do you want? It's the same toy. And they all transform basically the same. It's G1 Grimlock, just retooled with modern articulation and modern materials, components, sculpting, etc. So you're not getting a ton of variety in the Transformers toy line like you used to. Go back and look at G1. It was a whole new bunch of toys every year. New characters. Very few, very, very, very few reissues or retools or recolors or imaginings of same characters. There were 4 different Bumblebees in G1. There were 2 Optimus Primes in G1. And as far as I know, there was 1 Ironhide and 2 Starscreams and 1 or 2 Megatrons, and not a lot. There was new characters basically every release. Every new wave was new characters. With, on rare occasions, a previous character reimagined as a new toy. Optimus Prime became Power Master Optimus Prime. Bumblebee became Goldbug, etc. Now, Generation 2 was more or less a hodgepodge of just straight repaints of G1 toys and a handful of new toys. Car Robots 2001, which was sold in the US as Robots in Disguise, the first Robots in Disguise toy line, was all new toys. All new toys. Well, mostly new toys. There were a few Beast Wars, Beast Machines repaints, but for the most part, it was all new toys. And a couple of toys from, like, Machine Wars to fill out the line, but it was mostly new toys. Armada was all new toys. Energon was all new toys. Cybertron was all new toys. Animated was all new toys. And then we get to Titans Returns, Power of the Primes. And then going forward from there, you're just getting the same toys every year. You're always going to get a Jazz. You're always going to get a Prowl. You're always going to get a Starscream. You're always going to get a Hound and a Bumblebee and an Optimus Prime and a Megatron. And the Megatron does change from generation to generation, but the Optimus Prime is the same Optimus Prime you already have 6 versions of. Same with the Bumblebee, same with the Starscream, same with the Shockwave. You know, it's like the same toy over and over and over and over again. The only real variety you get is from the Studio Series, where you get representations of their movie counterparts. This would include the animated movie from 1986 and the Michael Bay movies and the subsequent sequels to the Michael Bay movies, including Bumblebee and Rise of the Beasts, etc. I saw 3 different Optimus Primals on the toy shelf. I saw at least 7 different Optimus Primes on the toy shelf. I saw 3 different Bumblebees on the toy shelf. 3 different Grimlocks on the toy shelf. You know what I didn't see? Any original characters. I didn't see... I got... When Cyberverse came out, I got that cowboy that turns into a car. I didn't see him. I didn't see that shark from Cyberverse. I just saw a lot of the same, RC. It's the same RC I already have. There was a Decepticon repaint of Hound, which it's just Hound. I already have Hound. It's just the same toy. They just repainted it and called it a Decepticon. Well, I'm not going to buy a toy I already have just because they repainted it. Not unless it's like, really interesting. Now, on the Star Wars side, Black has hit a brick wall. And I think the brick wall they hit is collectors, by and large, really only want the characters from the movies, the sagas. And they've run out of saga characters to release in Black. So now they're digging into the well, into the weeds. They're going to Clone Wars. They're going to The Bad Batch and Obi-Wan Kenobi and what was it called? Andor, etc., etc. And while there is a market for those characters, that's not the collector market. The collector market wants Darth Maul, Mace Windu, Lando Calrissian, Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Greedo, Jabba the Hutt. Characters from the saga films. They don't necessarily want characters from the TV shows. Now, the scaled down line, the vintage line, or the 3 3/4 inch line, yeah, people want Inquisitors, people want Supreme Leader Snoke, etc. But in the Black series, by and large, collectors really mostly want the characters they're familiar with, and so they've run out of characters to sell, and sales are down. And kids, I don't know, to be honest, I don't know if kids are watching the Star Wars. I don't know if Andor appeals to kids. I don't know if The Mandalorian appeals to kids. Those feel like very adult-themed shows compared to the Star Wars movies, which are definitely kids' movies. Whereas the Mandalorian especially is not a kids' show. That's an adult. It's got the child, the little, what's his name? Baby Yoda. But it's more geared towards adults than kids. Still accessible to kids, sure, but I just don't know. I have not seen in my limited experience with kids I haven't seen any kids talking about or getting excited for or playing with or watching these live action shows. No, yeah, the Bad Batch maybe, the Clone Wars sure, the cartoons yeah definitely, but these live action shows tend to be geared more towards adults. And I think the problem Hasbro is having is they're making toys that aren't appealing to kids, and at the same time, the toys they're making for collectors aren't asking for. So they're just sitting on the toy shelves, getting clearanced out and forgotten. You also have GI Joe, but GI Joe has been a whole mess since basically since GI Joe Extreme. GI Joe has not gotten a foothold in the market, either with kids or collectors, since GI Joe Extreme. It's been that long since they've been relevant. They've just sort of been sort of present in the market, off and on, but they haven't really made an impact on the market. And then you have Marvel Legends. And then you have two scales of Marvel Legends. You got the premium 6-inch figures, and then you got the retro style 3 3/4-inch figures. The retro style figures aren't flying off shelves because they're digging into the well a little too early. And I think that so you're not getting a lot of the characters that you're familiar with, like Spider-Man, Wolverine, etc. You're getting side characters, and I don't even know their names because they're side characters. When I look at the Marvel Legends vintage line, the 3 3/4-inch line, I do not see a lot of characters I recognize. Therefore, I don't see a lot of characters I'm interested in. I don't even see Punisher. I personally wouldn't buy Punisher, but Punisher's popular enough. He should have a figure in that line, and he doesn't. Now, I do believe X-Men 97, which is separate from Marvel Legends, is doing relatively well. From what I've seen, I see a healthy variety of toys on the shelves, and I see them selling because when I go to the toy store twice a week and they restock on, early in the week, they've got plenty of inventory. And then later in the week I go back, that inventory's gone, repleted. And then they restock again. So I think the X-Men 97 line is relatively healthy. So on the action figure front, the biggest problem Hasbro has is, one, they've run out of toys to sell. There's only so many Spider-Man action figures you can buy. And when it's the same action figure year after year, it's kind of hard to justify paying $15 for a Spider-Man figure you already got that you only had to pay $8 for 2 years ago. So I'm going to sidestep the whole inflation thing because that's just, part of capitalism. And inflation is affecting everything. So that's obviously a factor. But that's a factor beyond Hasbro's control. Next, we have their second division, which is one of their big divisions. Their board games. Now, I'm separating Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons separate from the board games, even though Hasbro probably sees them as the same thing. Because to people who play Magic the Gathering or Dungeons and Dragons, those are not the same people who play board games. Not that people who play D&D don't play board games sometimes, but people who play board games typically don't play D&D. They don't consider D&D a board game. I don't either. One of the problems you have with board games, you have two problems with board games. Problem number one is, again, not a lot of variety. So you're selling the same board game over and over again, which isn't in and of itself a problem because there's always going to be a market for Clue and Monopoly and Battleship, etc. Because new kids come into the world all the time and they create a new market for those games. But one thing you're seeing is kids, by and large, are more interested in tablets and mobile games than they are board games. and I've seen this firsthand with my nieces and nephews and their friends, as well as a rise of independent board games. So board game aficionados, the people who collect board games, the ones who buy board games because they love them and want variety in their board games, are not buying 17 Monopoly boards. They're buying these off-the-wall, weird indie games that you've never heard of, and I can't even name any of them because they're just so off the wall, none of them stick. And then, of course, you still have variety of things, like Trivial Pursuit, and you have variations of that. You have variations of, like, whatever the hot new property is, like, I don't know, Game of Thrones, or Big Bang Theory had a board game a while back. Community, I think, had a board game. Friends has had a board game, etc. So you're always going to have those board games that have some mass appeal. But those ones don't, by and large, drive the market. Those are just sort of like, impulse buys. Those are like, you have a member of your family who is into board games, who watches Star Trek, whatever. So you get them a board game of Star Trek, whatever, as a Christmas present. The other problem with board games is, like I said, the market has shifted. The market is more focused on indie games now, because people, by and large, are over Monopoly and Clue and Battleship and Aggravation. Those, they've been playing those games for 40 years. They want something new, something that challenges their minds, something a little more complex than just roll the dice and move your piece in a circle around the board. People want more than that now. They want games with, sculpted minis and, little set pieces and parts that you can assemble, and more variety to your choices and impact on your decisions, which is hurting Hasbro because they're not in that market. They're in the market of, putting Yoshi on a Monopoly board, or Pokemon, or Harry Potter, or whatever. And while there's always going to be a market for these various monopolies, it's not as big of a market as it has been in the past. And I think Hasbro's having a problem with that. Now let's shift over to Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering has had more complex problems than I can get to in a single video. I would have to dedicate a series of videos to Magic the Gathering to get into all the problems they're having. But bullet points. On the surface level, one of the problems they're having is they have a digital game now. They have an app that basically forgoes the need to collect cards. The other problem they're having is, my understanding, and I've seen this firsthand, the quality of the cards has gone down. So collectors are not happy with the cards as collectibles, so they're not collecting them in the numbers that they used to be. Also, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast have been doing some wonky things with Friday Night Magic that has got the community in an uproar. And on top of that, there's a lot more. They went the opposite route. Magic has the opposite problem as Transformers or Marvel Legends, and that their problem in those toy lines is not enough variety. The problem with Magic is too much goddamn variety. So traditionally, you would have 3 Magic lines going at once. You'd have the core line, you'd have an expansion line, and then you would more or less have the collector line, which was just for collectors. You could use those cards in a sanctioned game under certain circumstances, but by and large, those were cards that were sold to collectors for collectors. Now you have like 8 different lines running simultaneously, and it's too much. It's too much. I go into the card section of the department store, or the toy store, or wherever, and I don't even know which packs of Magic the Gathering cards to buy because there's so much variety. And we've always had some variety, but we have more variety now than we've ever had. And then you have the problem with the chase cards. The 1/1 ring for example, from the Lord of the Rings. One. Out of millions and millions and millions of cards printed, they printed literally one physical card of the One Ring. Just one. That was ridiculous. That pissed a lot of people off. And then you got the jumbo Magic cards, which I don't even get into. That's just a whole separate deal. I don't even know whose market is that. I don't know who's buying those. Those are just ridiculous. I don't buy the jumbo Magic cards because I don't understand what's the point of them. I don't even know what those are for. Magic has other issues that I don't want to get into, but some of the issues are the cards themselves. Not just the quality of the cards or the quality of the artwork, you know, them using AI art, for example, versus hiring actual artists. That has some people in an uproar. The other thing with the cards is, like I said, there's too much variety, so the cards are kind of, I'm going to say, dumbed down a little bit to have a more broader mass appeal, which doesn't work for a card that is, you know, tailored to a collector market. If the collectors aren't interested in your product, you have a problem. Because Magic the Gathering lives and dies by the collectors, you know? The gamers, by and large, are migrating to the app. So you're losing the gamers. They're not buying the cards. They would rather download the app for 99 cents, $10 or whatever it is, one time, and then just play the cards that they can get their hands on for eternity and never have to pay, you know, $15 a pop for booster packs, where you get like 12 cards and 6 of the 12 cards are lands, which you don't fucking need because you already got 30 lands when you bought the goddamn deck. And they're the same fucking lands from the beginning of time. It's the same, you know, it's grassland and fucking desert and fucking forest and fucking, you know, jungle. It's the same fucking card a bajillion times over. Don't put fucking lands in booster packs. That has me pissed off. If I open up a booster pack that I paid $12 for, and I am only getting 15 cards in that booster pack, I had better not get one goddamn ultra common fucking land. Especially fucking grassland. Or swamp, for God's sake. I've got 600 swamp cards in my Magic set. I do not need any more swamp cards. Stop selling swamp cards, for Christ's sake. So mismanagement is what's going on with Magic right now. Dungeons and Dragons would also take an in-depth series of YouTube videos to dig into all the problems it's having. So I'm going to do my best to surface level this so this video doesn't get too long. One of the problems D&D is having is, like the board games, D&D now has more competition than it's ever had in its life. And not just generic like GURPS or Tunnels and Trolls or Call of Cthulhu, the, you know, Vampire the Masquerade, etc. Those games have always been out there. But now they have legit serious contenders like Dungeon Crawl Classics. You've got Pathfinder. I don't know what it's called, but you got the game that Michael Mercer and company put out. And even Paizo has their own game that's separate from Pathfinder that is its own unique rule set that has no ties to D&D at all. So D&D now has competition on a scale and level they've never had. And this isn't even getting into retro clones or the indie scene, which the indie scene is blowing up right now. So D&D has a problem in that it's facing competition, and whereas it's had a monopoly for more or less 50 years, they don't know what to do with competition because they've pretty much had a monopoly its entire existence. What do you do when you've had a monopoly for 50 years and all of a sudden you have legit competition? What do? Well, you make asinine decisions is what you do. One of those asinine decisions is D&D Beyond and the virtual tabletop. Again, you're moving people away from buying physical products, books, dice, miniatures, etc., terrain, whatnot, and instead you're trying to get them to sign up for an app, a subscription, month-to-month subscription service, where you give them access to all this content and then sell them additional expansions piecemeal through DLC. Except the D&D market is more like the board game market than the trading card market, in that whereas trading card gamers have embraced digital because it's a whole hell of a lot better than collecting physical fucking cards, D&D is the opposite. D&D gamers want dice. We want miniatures. We want books. We want dungeon master screens and character sheets and, you know, terrain and maps and physical tangible things to touch and interact with at the game, at the table. Because D&D, even though it isn't a board game, it has more in common with a board game than Magic does. So the D&D audience does not want a digital product, yet we're being pushed a digital product. On top of that, you have the whole mess that I'm not even going to touch on with the OGL. The open game license. That debacle, even though they did backtrack and kind of save face, the damage was done. And so they shot themselves in the foot there. You also have, either as a relation to that, as, you know, say boycotts because of that, or the fact that the movie just flat sucks, because it does. You have the D&D movie, Honor Among Thieves, was a big fucking flop, lost a lot of money. While Honor Among Thieves is a better overall movie than the previous two Dungeons & Dragons movies, it's still not a good movie. It doesn't have the tone of Dungeons & Dragons. A Dungeons & Dragons movie should have the same tone and feel as a Lord of the Rings movie, not an MCU movie. So they shot the bed there. The other problem they're having with D&D goes back to not just pushing digital products. So what they're doing is they're getting rid of books. They're replacing books with PDFs, which there's a lot of pushback on. They're also fucking over retailers, specifically bookstores and hobby stores. Because what they did was I heard that they may have reversed on this, I don't know. But what they did was they said that they're going to stop partnering with their distribution partners and distribute the books themselves. You have to order them directly through Wizards of the Coast, which makes it harder because then it means you have to pay more because you have less competition and you have backlogs to deal with and things like that, because they can only print so many books at a time. And, you know, then they have to, you know, the logistics of figuring out how to get them from printer to warehouse to bookstore, which is not something they've ever had to do. So they're inventing a business that they previously outsourced in the name of efficiency, obviously saving money. You have the other problem of, this is a tangent, but this is a side tangent, but this is relevant. Newspapers are going out of business all across the country. Magazines are going out of business all across the country. And the reason why this is relevant is because you have fewer and fewer print products being ordered. So you have fewer print shops to do printing. And I saw this working at the newspaper I worked. We went from having a print shop 20 miles away to having to drive 3 hours to get our paper printed, and then had to delay delivery by a day just to get the paper out. And a lot of newspapers are going through this. And this is the same thing that's happening with books, because there's just less books being printed, there's not as many manufacturers who are capable, who have the capacity to print books. Now, also on top of this is the environmental issue of the fact that we're running out of trees. The type of trees that are used to make pulp are disappearing, and we're not regrowing them fast enough to meet demand, and so there's a back order on paper. Newspapers have had to switch to using recycled paper as much as possible just to have a fucking paper to print on. And so you're seeing all these problems, all these things pile up. And when you combine them together, just one thing after another, Hasbro's not in a very good place right now. Their toy division is failing. Their board game division is struggling. Their Magic the Gathering division is failing. The D&D division is failing. And they just don't have anything to fall back on. Their 4 core business products are all failing right now or struggling. That's not a good place to be. Now, toys as a whole have been struggling for a couple years now. Some of that was due to COVID, supply chain restrictions, etc. But some of that is also kids have moved on to tablets and video games and, other things, drones and, things like that. Like, they're just not as into action figures in the big, massive numbers as they used to be. This has been well documented and discussed by industry insiders left and right for the last few years. That's not to say kids don't still want toys or parents aren't still buying toys for their kids, because they are, just not in the numbers that they have been in the past. And then on top of that, you have the rise of third-party toy companies. You have third-party toy companies making Transformers toys that fill the market, that fulfill the needs of collectors. You have third-party companies like Super 7 making G.I. Joe action figures collectors want, whereas Hasbro's action figures that they're making aren't satisfying the market. So, yeah, they're getting pennies on the licensing from the Super 7 toys, but they're not getting as much money from selling a Super 7 through, a third party as they would just selling a G.I. Joe Classified to you directly. And I'm not even going to touch on the whole HasLab situation, because that is a mess in and of itself. That is just a whole string of problems that they don't know how to fix. So as of right now, it's safe to say Hasbro as a company is in shambles. And I hate to say it, but I don't think there's any saving it. I think what's going to happen is they're going to liquidate and sell off their assets piecemeal. Maybe Super 7 buys Kenner. Maybe NECA buys HasLab. Maybe, Paizo buys Wizards of the Coast, etc. Something's going to happen. Hasbro as a company is not going to survive if they keep making these mistakes. Now, I know you're going to be raising your pinky finger and saying, excuse me, they've been around 100 years. They're too big to fail. I can give you a whole list of companies that have been around for 100 years that were too big to fail that are gone. Gone, gone, gone. Sears, anyone? RCA, anyone? Atari, okay, Atari wasn't around long, but gone. Kmart, do you remember Kmart? Because we're far enough removed from Kmart's relevance that it's getting harder and harder to find people who remember them. So don't give me that they're too big to fail or they've been around too long. Bigger companies than them who have been around longer are gone. So they could definitely go away. There is no guarantee Hasbro lasts much longer, which is a shame. Now, I do believe if Hasbro as a company dissolves or liquidates or whatever, their assets will be sold off piecemeal to the highest bidder, and they're going to get scattered around. Mattel might buy a piece of it, and NECA might buy a piece of it, etc. But I don't see Hasbro existing much longer in its current form. Maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, and they're gone. If they don't do something drastic, they are not going to survive. Their stock prices are plummeting. As a company, they are not healthy right now. they're in a bad place to be right now. And you know what? I'm not buying Transformers as long as every time I go to the toy store, the only product they have to sell me is a fucking toy I already own. If you can't give me something new to buy, I'm not buying your shit. Give me something new. And I'm not going to pay a subscription to have a monthly subscription to have access to an intangible fucking PDF. Give me a book or you don't get my money.